Railway history. Unfortunately, much of our railway history is gone and forgotten, but parts of it exist around us in museums and displays. Sometimes it is in plain sight if you know where to look, or off the beaten track. In this series, I will discuss various railway historical events in an effort to help keep our railway history alive. In the late 50s, a plan was hatched that would have a huge impact on the railways of the Greater Toronto Area. The plan was to have the major railways build new yard facilities outside of the downtown core. Freight traffic would also be largely diverted into the suburbs. So what brought this idea for this project forward, and what were the driving factors behind this plan? With the increase in automobile and truck traffic and the movement of people away from the city center to the suburbs, Toronto was becoming increasingly congested. There was a major need for better commuter rail services than what currently existed. Also, the railways realized that the major profit center was the freight car business. Passenger express services were in a decline due to the increased competition of airlines, cars, and buses. Also, trains were becoming longer and would also contribute to downtown traffic congestion by blocking railway crossings. Grade separations or over underpasses were not as common as they are today. The development of the hump yard was a more mechanized way of sorting railway cars faster and more efficiently. The space to build these new yards just didn't exist in the city core. Next was the development of the plan and the plan itself. On March 11, 1959, under CN President Donald Gordon, $90 million was allocated for the diversion project and yard. In 1959, the project known as the Toronto Terminal Project began. The project would include the building of 37 miles or about 60 kilometers of new track to link up and complete our northern bypass of the city. It would also involve the converting of about 25 miles or 40 kilometers of a branch line to mainline status, which would mean the easing of grades, adding heavier rail, and passing sidings. All of these upgrades would be necessary to accommodate the more frequent, longer, and heavier trains. A large new yard would be built outside of the city limits where costs were lower and space was available. The current yards, Mimico, Parkdale, Simcoe Street, Cherry Street, Dawn, Bathurst Street, and the Danforth would be scaled down or phased out entirely. Mimico was the main CN yard, and it was already struggling with the amount of traffic, using the other yards as overflow. Today, only Mimico still exists for Via Rail and Go Transit, which calls their yard Willowbrook. The changes to Canadian Pacific were to be much smaller in scale. The largest project was the construction of a new yard, including a hump yard. This yard would largely replace LAMBTON and West Toronto yards. However, LAMBTON is still in use today in a much reduced role, as it is in the key junction location where the Galt, MacTier, and North Toronto subdivisions meet. The new yard, known as AGINCOURT Yard, would be in Scarborough along the existing main line between Brimley and Markham Roads. It was completed in April of 1964. Unlike Canadian Pacific, Canadian National had a much more daunting task ahead of them. However, the takeover of various railways over the years gave CN the advantage of using much of their existing trackage for the new diversion project. Basically, CN had to link their Oakville subdivision in the west with the Brampton subdivision up in Georgetown and the Oshawa subdivision in the east near Pickering. One plan was to build a new western connection from Port Credit, but housing development was already underway, and so CN opted for a connection further west. CN decided that the best option was to upgrade the MILTON subdivision from branch line to mainline status. This line would connect the Oakville subdivision in Burlington with the Brampton subdivision in Georgetown. The sleepy branch line would now become a very busy mainline route for Canadian National. Once completed, the Beaton or MILTON subdivision from Burlington to Georgetown was renamed the Halton Subdivision. The line running northeast of Georgetown would be renamed the Beaton Subdivision. The Brampton Subdivision would also become part of the Halton Subdivision from Georgetown to where the line met the Weston Subdivision near Malton. In the end, the Halton Subdivision would include the portions mentioned above and include new trackage from Malton to the new yard. New trackage east of the new yard, the connection with the Oshawa subdivision in Pickering, would be called the York Subdivision. The yard was originally called Toronto Yard and later renamed Macmillan Yard in 1975 after Norman John Macmillan, who was the executive vice president at the time of the project and later became the president of CN. The Toronto Terminal project would turn out to be immense in scale and take about 5 years to complete. Not only did this project change the way freight trains move around the GTA, but it also was the impetus for GO Transit, the vital commuter service that we so depend upon every day. That ends part 1. In part 2, I will discuss the history of the line through Milton. Thank you for watching an episode on railway history. If you have any aspects of railway history that you're curious about, feel free to reach out to me with your suggestions or questions. Also, if you like this video and are interested in seeing more historical content, please subscribe to my channel.